overview, right, of his case.
Mhm.
Did you talk about in detail at all? You did, right? Okay. Okay. So do you think I can go straight to the 3 months?
Yeah, that's where I think we were.
We're at 3 months?
Yeah.
Okay. So good. So let's go to, I don't know if this is in your book, but I can read it to you. If not, but let's talk about, so you've been following Mr. Jones for, he's been in care management for 3 months. And so then, so here we are at 3 months. So Mr. Jones saw his PCP shortly after his first intervention visit with the care manager. His blood pressure at that time was 163/107. The PCP added a beta blocker, a metoprolol, to his regimen, and also started him on metformin for his diabetes. And this is at 500 milligrams twice a day. And then the PCP and you, as his care manager, told him to check his blood pressure and his blood sugar once a day and then come back in another month. Okay, is that in your book? It's not in your book, okay. So let's pause here for a second. Let's think about, just as a reminder about Mr. Jones. You remember about him, so obviously he's got hypertension, he has diabetes. Here's his, in the story here. This is, so these are some of his lab results here. You know, his blood sugar he has diabetes, but his hemoglobin A1C is out of control, of course. His kidney function is fairly normal. Those liver tests, they're not normal, just so you know. And then you can look at his personal data. So he's 48, from Baltimore, finished high school, works full time in maintenance, doing maintenance work. He's divorced. He has one adult child, and not so close to that child. Has some social support though from his brother and his mother. And then the medical history is listed there in terms of his medications for cholesterol. He takes aspirin. He takes nitroglycerin. He takes losartan for hypertension. He eats fast food up to 3 times a week for lunch, drinks beer, sounds like in the evenings. And he has never been diagnosed with depression, but kind of scored on the high end on the screening test, the PHQ-9 there. And you all remember this about his family history, with a family history of diabetes and hypertension, as well as some heart disease in the family. And then these were his concerns when you saw him the first time, or when you came to the PCP for the first time. He had this abdominal pain, and was sent, I guess was referred to kind of get that evaluated. You all talked about this part yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we can kind of skip through. And then he was having some stressors, these financial difficulties and family stressors with having been recently divorced. Can go on through, Joe. Let's go down to the PCP's therapeutic regimen just to remind you. We can leave that up. So this is kind of where he was left after the PCP visit. Is there one more about what the CM did or no? No, and then we go to 3 months. Okay. So basically the PCP kind of addressed some of the concerns about the abdominal pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then you saw him, and he's been enrolled in care management through this time period. So those are the changes that were made, that upper part. And then in that time frame, Mr. Jones actually didn't go back to see the PCP,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because several issues came up in his life. So his financial situation worsened, including that he fell behind on his mortgage payments, and he's now facing foreclosure, right? And housing is in general is a big issue for him, and his daughter, who, as we mentioned earlier, he doesn't have a great relationship with, his daughter won't take him in, and his brother lives out of state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what are some of your thoughts, I guess, about him at this
I
point?
would step up to a community health worker with regards to now his housing status has changed. His housing, he's now in foreclosure. The daughter won't take him in, so essentially he could become homeless if there isn't an intervention
Mhm.
So I would do the step up to the community health worker to assist him with his social needs. And then regarding his blood pressure, I would still sort of do some motivational interviewing around, you know, how is he doing with taking the medication? What does it mean to his health if he takes it? Just because with him being more adherent to his blood pressure regimen, it's more likely that he would have a better result with regards to his blood pressure. And so if he misses the primary care provider because of his life issues, it sort of wouldn't be a big issue because the blood pressure is now managed, and so he has a plan of action in place that he can work with myself and the care manager to make sure he reaches the goals that was set out to him. But certainly do some motivational interviewing around the blood pressure, taking the blood pressure medication, and then stepping him up to a community health worker.
Okay, great. So to other folks, what would you do?
I have a question. Where's his mom now? Does she have
Same.
her own home?
So his mom, so if we recall from the earlier slides, you wanna go up, Joe?
Yeah, she's 70 and she has her
Right,
own
so
health
she's
insurance.
got health issues,
Mhm. He's
and
taking care of
he's
her,
kinda taking care
to
of
the
her,
doctors.
right
Yeah.
here. Tries to care for a mother who's struggling to afford her medications and attend doctor's appointments.
Yeah.
So does she have her own house? Is she living with him? Do we have two of them that we're kind of concerned about now because of the possible foreclosure? I mean, that could be a big stress factor right there. Increasing the blood pressure too. I mean, if he's a caregiver for his mom. So, yes, community health workers,
Yeah.
social workers, CM all working together. But I just didn't see anything about the mom, and I just wanted to.
About where the
Yeah.
mom's living?
Yeah.
So let's say, for the sake of, our discussion, let's say that,
She in assisted living now.
let's put let's say that, or she lives in a own separate place,
Yeah.
right? And that he is dealing with his own, where he is currently living, but that he does provide some instrumental support to mom, right? So he's going over and helping her out, but the concern is mostly his housing situation. So it sounds like, at least for two of you, thinking stepping up would be important. Let's explore a little bit, like, this issue of his medication, medications that he was recently taking,
Well,
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, he has not returned back to the doctors in a
Mhm.
month. We don't know if the medications are working or not. I heard you say now that his blood pressure is stable, but we don't even know that because he didn't even
No.
go back.
Not that his blood pressure is stable, but because of his social needs, that can possibly trump him even coming into the clinic. So my suggestion was sort of doing some motivational interviewing around helping, sort of assessing his level of adherence, and then figuring out how we can support him better with at least being adherent to the medication
Okay.
Okay,
while we're trying to work out his other stuff.
okay.
Keep in mind, he hasn't returned back to see his PCP to have that follow-up appointment in that month, within a month. We don't know what his glucose is like. We don't know what his blood pressure is like. And I see this is 3 months later, but I don't see anything about a hemoglobin A1C being done.
Being repeated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's again, for the sake of this discussion, let's assume that he hasn't gone for any blood work, what's the only things that have happened, he saw, as it says at the top, so he saw his PCP kind of right after he had that first visit that we talked about, and these are the parameters that are listed there, and then he just didn't come back, so he didn't come back for, let's assume he didn't come back for blood work, and he hasn't come back for
His
a visit
follow-up.
in that month.
We don't even know what the hemoglobin A1C is.
True.
I think for me, for this gentleman, he needs some like really like strong case management with him. where as though, what would I call it? He's like a higher risk patient. One, because of his medical conditions, he has the diabetes, he's sort of like at risk right now for having a stroke or heart attack. And if we sort of let him fall by the wayside and just check in with him periodically, we may miss some opportunities to try and engage him back into care and get him to come to his medical appointment. So I think he's the kind of patient that would need some sort of like really I can't find the word I'm looking for, but he needs some like deep case management.
Okay, what, so,
Like
so.
serious case management.
Okay, serious case management, strong case management.
Yeah.
If I was tweeting right now, I would hashtag strong
Strong
case
case
management. So, some people know that I tweet. But, so what would, what do you think?
Since he has been back, that would be considered like, he would be on the corner to missing appointments. So
Right.
actually that would call for a community health worker to actually go to the home to do a home visit.
So you're saying, because he's missing appointments.
Right, and he not.
Okay.
So usually 2 missed or 3 missed appointments is a flag to go and try to locate the patient, see what's going on, see if they're still alive. See if anything changed, how, like if he is homeless or on the street. So we actually do go out, we'll look in the system and find out what their address or emergency contact, and we'll make contact with them to see if, maybe a relative, if we send a relative, and sometimes when you call them, they say, oh, we have a number, he's this, so you can get information from them, and then we usually go out to try to make contact, face-to-face contact with the patient, and try to find, because sometimes it can be, even though we see all the things that's going on, at hand now, it can be some other things that are out there dealing with on the street that we don't know until we encounter that patient right there, and we find out a lot of other stuff going on that's not even mentioned in the charge yet.
Now remind me, are you are a
Community health
worker?
With total
Okay,
health
right.
care.
with
Total-
Uh-huh.
And so with Hopkins, we have the CM has to refer it to us. So we-
Yeah,
So,
and you're also a CHW,
I'm a
right?
CHW
Uh-huh.
as well.
Mhm.
But see, the big thing is gonna be for the CM to
Mhm.
have a lot of good, strong, case management with that member,
Yeah.
and then get the community health worker involved, because we're not gonna know until the CM actually refers to us.
Refers you, okay. So great, and I wanted to include you in,
Yeah, I'm like,
okay. What are your thoughts?
what I was gonna actually say is, after, like Mary was saying, after the care manager gets involved, refer to the community health worker. And I just know in the past, I've helped a couple of patients with eviction notices by contacting some local churches, because like Danielle was saying, he might be homeless sooner or later. So I would first prioritize by maybe contacting the community churches to see if they can get involved in helping provide at least with some towards his eviction notice that he's going to get, and just work from there.
Okay,
Because that might be raising his blood pressure, stressing him more out, and
Okay, and you're also
I'm a
CHW, right?
CHW,
Okay.
yes.
So this is great. So I think it sounds like we're for the case manager, you're a case manager.
No.
You're CHW as well.
No,
Okay.
I'm just gonna be supervising,
The CHWs.
and
Yes.
I'm supervising the Rich Life Project at Total Health Care.
She
That's
out
all.
boss.
Okay. I'm just saying, I'm just making sure I'm clear on everybody's roles. Okay. So great, and so to update, just so maybe you can share where we are in the room. Yeah, we're talking about Mr. Jones, who's a case you all I think discussed yesterday. So great. So you're the lone case manager, right, in the room right now? Okay. So it sounds like you and it sounds like the others in the room, CHWs and supervisors, are in agreement that this would be a patient that would be appropriate for stepping up
Yes.
to the CHW. Okay. So,
Do you think, for getting your opinions, behavioral health should get involved too at this point? I mean, the case manager is going to be talking to the member, and it's just so overwhelming. maybe behavioral health might need
What
them.
we suggested on yesterday, because his PHQ-9 score was 6, and then we took into the account that he has some recent change of life issues where he got divorced, he about to lose his house, he taking care of his mama, and she
Right.
can't take care of
Right.
herself, so it sounds like he has like, one, he has caregiver role strain, what we think, like the stress around that, caring for a loved one, elderly parents. And then 2, he has a change of life status where he's going through a divorce, which could also cause some stress. So we proposed to make sure on the back end that we're gonna be assessing his mental health status along the way to see if he sort of teeters over that score of 6, and then we can escalate it from there. But certainly, the plan was to do check-ins with him mentally, maybe review the PHQ-9 test again with him. And we thought about doing it again at this 3-month follow-up, so this would be a good time to redo that test to see where he is mentally, to see if he does need to get stepped up to mental health.
Yeah, because support groups would be a really good resource for him too.
If he got time.
If he sounds like he's
Well,
got
yeah.
one.
He works.
Some
It sounds like a
some
good
go
idea,
to the
though.
house, some come out and meet with the
But he
member.
about ready to be homeless, so he might not have a house.
Unless he goes and he stays with his mom.
Well, I don't know, yeah.
Or we could help him stay at his house. We just
Yeah,
have to
right.
find
I mean,
all
there's a
the
lot of
tricks in
different
the
So-
arsenal.
I would
Ways we
go with
can do.
housing first. I usually, when our patients are struggling with housing situations, I usually use 2-by-1, but get them into a transitional home until we can end up applying for housing assistance programs, the voucher programs is what I usually do with them. Like, and 2-by-1 is really good. I had one guy who was homeless and was like, I need somewhere to go, and I called 2-by-1. They actually picked them up downtown and they could do the shelter, they could be, and so housing, I think, if you don't have nowhere to live, I would.
No, housing is, I'm not disagreeing that housing isn't important, it
Right.
is important, but I mean, I work with homeless too, and I have homeless that won't go to transition. I have people who don't stay on the street before they go to transition.
And you know what I
or
came to
shelter.
realize with working with adult patients, not to cut you off, is that we can like bring up all of these fabulous things to do to help them, but if they're not willing to help themselves, it's almost pointless a little bit, because we could really be, especially for me, when I was new to community health, nursing, and you sort of pour your heart and soul out into these patients, but at the end of the day, they still have to do their part. And so I've kind of learned to just give them the information, go as hard as I can with the patient, and leave it at the end of my 8-hour day, because they still have to be the ones. Like, we can preach to this patient all day long, Mr. Jones, about why it's important to take his blood pressure medication, but if he don't take it, at least you've done your part. But it's sad because it's like, we know we want to help you, but I just wanted to give that as a
So-
thought.
No, I think that's an important kind of piece of it. I think one of the things, it sounds like, at least from this little vignette, it sounds like for him that his priority is his housing concern, right? And so I think, to your point about you can do all, you sort of tell them what would be the best thing for them to do, but at the end of the day, they have to do it, right? Often that's guided by the patient's actual priorities, right? So they're gonna be most likely, if anything, to do the thing that they believe is the most important for their life, right? And so, sounds like for him, this housing thing is a big issue. So if we wanted to then step him up to a CHW, this is where I think a conversation between our CM and the CHWs would be helpful. What type of information, CHWs, would you like to receive? What would you need to know in order to be effective at working with this patient on his issues? So maybe Raven, you want to weigh in? Are you also a CHW?
Yes.
Okay, you want to weigh in about what you might need to know?
Like just in regards to like what community resources you would need?
Yeah, so that if you're gonna be on the receiving end, and actually we should, in a second, we'll kind of circle back to the process a little bit. You're going to be receiving, you're gonna be getting this patient's gonna be stepped up to you, right, in the Rich Life Project. What information would be helpful to you to be able to, determine how you can help them?
Any concerns that he might have expressed during the CM's first meeting or any encounters after that helps, because normally they'll say one thing to the CM and then something completely different to the CHW, so being able to compare notes is always great. I like when my CMs give me what they want their patients' goals to be. I know patients have their own goals, but when they have ones in mind that patients might not think are important, that's helpful when I'm trying to relay that message. And I mean, the assessment that the CMs do that we went over yesterday, that all of that information is helpful to, to determine what kind of resources they might need.
Okay. Other people have thoughts on what you would want to know?
I was just gonna say pretty much just demographic information, the address, the telephone number where we can find him. I'd like to know background with the family. Like, I would like to know that the daughter's not in the picture, just so I don't call on her. I would like to know that the is it the son that lives out of state?
The brother lives out of state.
So the brother lives out of state, so that's not like an option for him to, go live with him at that time. So pretty much just like as well as what Raven was saying, just the assessment, that's good to know. Because it does, the case manager assessment addresses some of the social barriers as well with the transportation, emotional support.
Okay, great. So let's take a moment here to think about what the process is. So do you want, Joe, I don't know if you want to walk through, like as far as the stepping up process. So you all have you been trained in that?
So we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, maybe we
The
can
step-up
reiterate
process.
it. Yeah, the step-up process.
You have this in your binders. and if
Joe,
you
can
want
you
to-
step from behind
from around
the
this
pillar?
way.
You do have this in your binders, but we did we made some printouts a little while ago. But we talked about this with the care managers, but I don't know if the CHW's had the opportunity to talk a little bit about what that means. So what we're doing is we're essentially doing, at 3 months, we're hoping to step patients up in a tiered approach. So like initially they'll have their first intervention visit with the care manager, and then after that first visit, the care manager would set goals with the patients or talk about some of the things that they wanted to get addressed. After that first visit, there would be a follow-up appointment scheduled, and so you can either step the patient up at 1 month or 3 months. We built in an exception for 1 month, and we're pushing to have patients stepped up as soon as to a CHW at 3 months. Now, there are going to be patients who the care manager will determine could use step up a lot sooner than 3 months. And so that's where we have an exception built in for those patients, could be at 1 month. Now, we also have the option to step a patient up to a specialist, and that's going to be something outside of what the CHW is going to be working with. But it is important to know because the care manager might consult with you or come talk with you and have a little meeting to talk about the patient while they were under your care. So with the CHW, because some of the information that they want to provide to the specialist could come from your assessments and some of the thoughts you have with this, especially if this is a behavioral health issue. So some of the patients could get stepped up to the psychiatrist in our step-up protocol. And so for that, they may come to you and ask for information about that. So it's, like I said, it's like a stepped approach. So at 3 months, they would come to you and say, hey, this patient could use a CHW, or it could be 1 month, hey, this patient needs a CHW. At which point you would then meet with the nurse and you would talk about the patient, you would take the patient on to your care, and then from there you already did your own needs assessment, you have the needs assessment, you will work on setting goals with the patient and working through. If the patient's still not controlled, then the care manager would have the option to think about other options as well. But at that point, they would be, you know, under your care. And so 1 or 3 months is what we're looking at.
And it could be past, it could be even beyond 3. It could be, there could be patients that don't need a care the help of a CHW even at 3 months. It could be later. I just wanted, just so they're clear on why this sort of 3-month thing, and this is something we spoke with the care managers about the other day, is that, you know, this is a research study. And so in that sense, we are trying to test different approaches to caring for patients who have high blood pressure and have other conditions, right? And so we're trying to figure out, when I say we're trying to test it, we're trying to figure out which approach works best. And if we were to step the patients up too early, and there will be people who will need it, and we know that, and that's why we have we making exceptions for them. But if, say, everyone got stepped up very quickly, we wouldn't be able to distinguish what works, right? We wouldn't know if it's the care manager that really made the difference for them, or if it's the care manager plus the CHW that made the difference. If they're together, you know, in caring for the patient kind of so quick and so early in the course of the patient's care. That's why we want at least a little time, ideally, to be able to observe how the patient's doing with care manager alone, and then, you know, with the CHW or with the specialist core, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the reason for at least an effort to try to separate out the time frame that they're getting this support from the different folks that are on the team. Does that make sense? So that's but, you know, there will be people that will have a crisis, right? You know, the patient's about to lose their home, you know, even with it at a month after you started working with them as care managers, and they'll need to be stepped up. But we hope that will be a rare circumstance, and that most people will be just with the care manager for that first 3 months.
Yeah. You didn't get this one? Okay.
Huh?
So these should
Yeah,
be in your
you
binders.
hope.
I think we printed them out here in the back.
We're in the binder.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
For
we're
the
going
step-up
to-
process, yeah.
So
yeah.
that's one of the things we're gonna work on.
But it's nothing in nothing.
Okay.
Oh.
We're going to actually take your binders over the weekend, if you guys wouldn't mind. And we're going to like clean them up and make sure that they're very well. You can check out our master that Erica put together. It looks a lot better. But you'll have this in your binder, and what it does is it'll guide you like how to coordinate a step up, and it'll like, you know, we kind of like outline this for you, so it makes it a lot easier and something that's more consistent around. So go ahead and take a look at this. We did print them out in the back if you wanted to read them sooner. And then also, this is for the specialist consultation. So this is stepping the patients up to the CHW, and then from there going on to the specialist. Looks like you have that one. Yeah, here, I'll let you look. And if you, yeah.
So
And if
there
you
is
have
a
any questions
form,
about
and so to the points that were raised earlier, there would be an exchange of the information in terms of the assessment. Do they know that like in terms of, do the care managers know that it's not you that's the PIN person, is it
Yeah, I'll be the,
for the CHW?
well,
too?
not for for the care managers.
I have a question about documenting follow-up phone calls.
Yeah.
Where do we do that at?
So there's a care manager, well, in the care manager post data collection form, I'll have to take a look at that to see if it's included in there. But that is something that we're capturing, like how many times that you reached out to the patient and stuff like that. And I believe it's in the post CM data visit form, but I'll have to look at that. I'll look. But we are keeping track of that. Like how long did it take for you to get a hold of this patient and get your appointment scheduled?
Okay. So,
One thing that Danielle had mentioned when we talked last was that she may want to step a patient up. At that 1 month period, she already has that in her mind, so one thing she said that she wanted to know if they could brainstorm and maybe talk about it, talk to the CHW about this patient a little sooner.
Let me talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like proactive. Like once I find something out, I just like to get it done and work on it, so that I'm not forgetting about it later and moving on to the next thing or person. We have another 1,000 issues. So for me, after I get my assessment done, I would hopefully already have communicated with the community health worker just to say, hey, this patient, I met with them, they have this, and this going on that I might need your assistance with, just to give them a heads up about the patient. And so I'm thinking what I could do to stretch that 2-month process out, even though I know, stretch that 1-month process out before stepping them up, even though I know they need the community health worker right away, is for me to just give them a phone call every 2 weeks and just say, hey, how's it going? Are you all right? How's it going taking your medication? How is housing? Is that still stable? And just every 2 weeks sort of check in with the patient via phone. So then that way by that like 4th week, if the patient still needs that one thing that I was thinking about from the initial assessment, then I can step them up that way, is what I was thinking to do.
That sounds great, and I mean to interrupt. Hi, good morning, everyone. So that sounds really good, and I think there are a couple of things that came to mind as you were saying that. The first is that hopefully one of the CHWs would be in that first intervention visit with you. So after that visit, you two could talk about the patient, talk about the things that stood out to you in terms of their social needs and the ways that you anticipate the CHW helping them in the future. I really loved what you said about calling them every couple of weeks and figuring out, asking them how they're doing, because I think in the protocol, it actually asks for the care managers to do that on a weekly basis. And I think based on what I've seen from Total Health Care and the patient population that you guys have, you probably are going to have to be doing that weekly, and then from there you'll be able to determine from your clinical judgment whether or not the patient needs to be stepped up sooner than the 3-month timeline. So I totally agree with everything that you said, and I was thinking as you were talking that it's very consistent with the way the protocol is written, and hopefully the way that the CHW and care manager workflows are supposed to work together when it comes to supporting the patient.
Strong care management, hashtag strong.
Strong care management.
You missed that, we've been having hashtags. So, that's what it is.
Strong care management.
Yes, strong care management. So yeah, I think, absolutely. So it sounds like a great approach. Now, if, when it gets to the point, obviously, where it's, then the CHW is going to see that person and start engaging with them, and obviously that's the step up, right? And that's your sort of step up process.
And it
go
could
ahead.
be that at that 1 month period, something's straightened out,
Mhm.
And then at that point that you would say, well, maybe this is a 3-month step up.
Right.
That initially, and so then you would continue to do, maybe you spread out the calls a little bit more, but.
So after the initial face-to-face visit with the patient to get the initial assessment done, how often are we doing face-to-face visits with the patient after that?
That's a good question. I think it will probably depend on the patient's preferences. It's because I think the way that the protocol is written is that we may have said like weekly follow-up over the phone, but the patient might actually want to see you in person. So I don't think that we have the expectation that every single follow-up encounter that you have with the patient will occur face-to-face.
Okay.
But if the patient would like to see you in person, that would be totally fine.
And do you remember there are going to be some patients that, like, for instance, when we did our blood pressure training, who wouldn't be a candidate for the home blood pressure monitor, but who we would still want to get multiple measurements on. So say their blood pressure is out of range, and it would be a perfect time to call them in to do that check-in. Also get a blood pressure measure, and it would get more data on that patient so that they can provide that with their provider. That's a case where you might do like an in-person. But that would be you making that determination, and then also the patient's preferences.
Okay.
So what declares the patient not being able to receive one of the blood pressure, the home blood pressure?
Yeah, so patients so maybe the cuff's too large or too small for their arm, it just won't work. The cuff won't work for them. And so it only comes with one size cuff, unfortunately. It's not going to fit every patient. And so in those cases, you wouldn't be sending them home with a home blood pressure monitor. But we'd still like to get more data on their blood pressure. And so at that point, you can set up maybe that weekly or bi-weekly time for them to come in and at least get their blood pressure, do the 3 measures, and then you'll have more on them. So.
Very good. Can I ask a logistics question? Are we for this particular session through 10:30, and then we go to this next one? Because I think tell me
Okay.
about I think we may be ahead. So,
Mhm.
is the next session supposed to be from like 10:30 till?
It was supposed to be from 10:30 to noon, but
Okay,
if you
okay.
feel that everyone pretty much has a sense of the best way forward,
For the CHW step up, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying. I think we're
yes.
clear on that. Did you want to go to the next phase, or are all the people that need to be here for that here, the specialist one?
well, so Pete is leading the specialist one. I mean, I don't know if he's around. and I-
He is, I think he's in his office. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I
Um,
can ask him to come now.
Yeah, and then I don't know what we can do in terms of moving up the other parts, but I feel like, I mean, I don't know, do you feel like seems pretty clear? We've had a robust discussion.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it
You wanna try?
sounds good. So, I mean, I had a few thoughts as I was looking at today's schedule. The first is that it's supposed to go from, you're supposed to have a break after this, and then we have the next training, or the next training session rather, and then lunch is from noon to 1:30. But we could actually have a working lunch where we just debrief and talk about the case studies, and then leave at 1:30. So I don't know how I mean, that sounds like a good thing, but I don't know how you all feel about
I see some
that.
happy, all I see are happy eyes.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Okay,
I might-
great.
One of you
If it's
grab
in my
Pete's
movie,
right
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in the corner.
Instead of having to go to the movie, so late.
He's just right around the corner. He's right, yeah, just, it's like 1-500 D or E, it's right there, yeah. But we can, oh, you have a comment?
Like 3 movies, one
Oh.
movie that I wanna
Oh, yeah, sure.
I guess my understanding in regards to the research, the study itself.
Yeah, maybe it may be a question that everybody has, so,
Well, and I apologize if you all
no,
already
please, let's do it.
discussed this, because I was doing remotely and I couldn't hear
Right.
everything.
Mhm.
We have the member, and they're coming into their first session, and the ideal world is that it's the CM and the CHW together. And then after the member leaves, the CM and the CHWs, we could talk, and even the supervisor, we could talk in regards to how we're going to go ahead and work with the member. What if during that initial meeting, the member says, I had transportation here today, but I don't know how I'm going to get here for my next appointment? It's not 4 weeks after, it's right then, right there. Or what if in conversation the member says, I'm having financial difficulties and I'm not sure about, I guess basically, if the social issues are coming up during the initial visit, can the CHW get involved at that point, or do you want us to hold back for the study purpose?
Okay,
Can I answer that question?
Yes, please,
For
yeah.
the purpose, I think that's an awesome question, and it's something I've been thinking about as well. I think for the sake of the integrity of the study, we still want the care manager to be the one addressing those issues, but we also want the CHW to be aware of them. So you would still kind of hold back, and the reason is because we really are trying to evaluate this whole step up process. So what does it take? What are the parameters surrounding the decision to step a patient up to a community health worker for additional support? I mean, I think that's a great question, because it's not just a study, it's people's actual lives. But that's to me, that's like the short answer to your question. We can talk about it some more.
It's just because I know with what we're doing outside of the study, it's like we zoom in right away.
Right,
And
right.
that might be something that we're all fighting at the bit in regards to,
Mhm.
what do you mean?
so some of
Yeah.
it is, we spoke about this, a few moments ago about, we're trying, as you all you provide very valuable services, right? And it is, and your salaries, come, right? They're part of the system that you work in. You're being paid to do those things. What we are trying to do is to understand, where the greatest benefit is derived, right? And whether there are some services that can be provided by the care manager alone, right? And some benefit that can be derived from that. We're trying to distinguish between that and and the type of clinical response or improvement in health outcomes that will only come in the setting of care manager plus CHW, or care manager plus specialist, or care manager plus CHW and specialist, right? So that's the mindset, so that we can understand, you know, who, you know, for which patients do we really need all three of those provisions, right? In which patients can we, right? So you probably, I'm sure in your work, you have, the care managers you work with have learned some of those strategies that you employ, right? Your fingers crossed. And so there may be some things that they can deliver on their own, or they can help the patients navigate on their own, but then there are going to be other things where it's like, hey, no, we really need a CHW out, going to the person's home, meeting them out in their community, understanding what resources are there in their community, and then that's going to be a different patient. Does that make sense? I know it may be a tough thing to wrap your head around, but that's what we're trying to understand is like which patients really must have you know, 2 or 3 kind of teams working on their behalf.
Thank
So.
you.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's an important question. So what do you think? We've got Dr. Miller. We're ahead of schedule. You want to go, so Joe, do we still have this up?
Yeah, we do. It's just, you have to
Okay.
move the mouse. You can actually hit left and right with that little click.